And we have Dr. Darren Stevens. He is a development psychologist with an expertise in organisational behaviour and people behaviour. He is an author of constructive development theory, and his work supports leaders, coaches, individuals, and therapy-based interventions. He has also written the foreword for the Catalyst of Change book, and I cannot wait to get stuck into a conversation with him. Darren, thank you for being here with us today. And I'd like to start with my favourite question of a time when you had that feeling, that stir, that ache, or even a boulder that whacks you over the head because you've not listened to the other feelings of when you felt like you were meant for more. Do you have a story or many stories to share?
I am well. I spent a lot of time in my summer house. This is my study today. But in my summer house, I spent a lot of time, a good few years, 6 years, researching and developing what I was thinking about, and I didn't know what I was thinking about, but I knew that I was. I don't know how to say this, but I knew I was kind of wasting my time. As it turns out, I wasn't wasting my time, but I felt like I wasn't doing what I could do. And then a friend of mine introduced me to a guy called Robert Keegan and Otto Lasky. And Otto Lasky's work on complexity was fantastic. And it made me realize that actually we all think differently. And I couldn't pinpoint before that why, for example, I understood stuff. When someone explained something, I got it, but other people didn't get it. I couldn't understand it. I didn't know why they didn't get it. And then reading Keegan and looking at it from an emotional perspective, and then reading Lasky and looking at it from a cognitive perspective, I was using a profile tool, and I was working at a university in London, just part-time. I created an extracurricular activity for them, but it wasn't that fulfilling. But then what I did was I realized that the levels of development that I've been reading about could be deconstructed using these 50 shortcuts that I was looking at in this profile system called the Identity Compass. And that spurred me on. I realized that I had a new way of looking at adult development, but from a self-awareness perspective. And this is what we're talking about right now. We're talking about how self-aware we are. And in the moment, I was kind of aware that I felt like I was wasting my life. And then I went to talk to a lecturer in Coventry, because I was working at Coventry in London just by pure chance. So I went to talk to a lady, Professor Gale, in Coventry, and told her I'd like to turn it into a PhD. And she said, yeah, all right. And from that moment, I knew my PhD gave me a phenomenal purpose. I can't describe to you how the PhD focused my thinking, focused my life, really. Do you know what I mean?
What were you doing then that you thought you were wasting your life? What were you actually doing? Was it a job? What was it you were doing that day?
I volunteered for a TV show, and it was about how people spend their money. And you can't really tell, but this is an old Victorian house with high ceilings. And we appear to be wealthy. We're not wealthy. But the way we were portrayed in the TV show was that Darren did nothing. I've got a pool table, right? And I was portrayed as, whilst my wife goes out to work at 5 a.m., Darren's playing pool in the summer house, wasting his life, right? They didn't mention the research. They didn't mention anything else. But it was that portrayal, it was that perception of, Darren, what are you doing? That wasn't, I understood why they did it. They did it for clickbait. That's not the word to use for TV, but you get my point, right? They recorded, and if anybody's ever interested in this, they recorded 3,600 minutes of me. They used 10
Minutes.
That's minutes. That's how TVs work. They made me out to be the bad guy. I would love to redo that TV show and show them what I've come up with now, but, so be it. It is what it is.
What was it called?
Britain's Spending Habits with Anne Robinson. Please don't watch it. Please don't watch it. It's terrible.
Of course, we're compelled to now.
I know, right? Exactly.
So was it that you were seen in a light you didn't want to be seen in, or was there something in it that you were watching that you thought you're wasting
I was.
unfulfilled potential?
All my mates took the mickey out of me because I was literally at home doing, as far as they were concerned, nothing. Right? I'm doing nothing. I'm sat at home. I'm playing pool, playing video games. I wasn't playing video games. What I was doing. Okay, so what I was doing was researching Keegan and Lasky and development and philosophy and levels and trying to work out how it all worked. Because even before I did my PhD, I had the idea for my theory. My theory is called constructive development theory, and it's how aware we are of our construction of self in the moment. How does Lisa present herself now? Is Lisa completely at choice in how she comes across? I'm going to guess you're at choice. I was doing that, but the perception was from my mates that your wife earns more money than you can afford to stay at home, you're dossing and you're stealing a living, or whatever the words are. Only when I kicked off the PhD did I realise that I actually had quite a lot of contribution already. And that's what it boils down to. It's about what is my contribution. So now you go back to your very first question. It's about what is my contribution? Yeah. And sitting in the summer house, I wasn't contributing. Now I feel I am, but now I can see the connection between what I did for a few years in the summer house to what my outcome is with my research, my PhD, my institute. My research is in like 7 languages. I see the connections now, but at the time, I couldn't see it.
Yeah, there's a lot about self-awareness, consciousness, self-acceptance, self-trust. Share what you're doing now, your Institute of Adult Development. Just share what that is, because this is from being perceived as a dosser on the program
Thanks, Lisa.
to this amazing institute that you have set up and teaching people, teams, adults,
It's adults.
developmental interventions. Just share a bit more of what that looks like and what people go on to do, so we can see you as the amazing Dr. Darren Stevens that you are, rather than the doctor.
You don't have to pause saying that. I have no problem with it. Yeah, but it is the doctor title is a result of the PhD. For me, the research speaks for itself, and the doctor title is only really useful in academia.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I said to you, and when you get pulled over for speeding, right, by the police. What I did was, I've got these 50 cognitive shortcuts that we use. For example, internal, external, towards, away from. Now, they were within a system called NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, and they were originally called meta programs. However, once I researched them and looked at them from a completely different angle and mapped them to levels of cognitive complexity and also emotional complexity, what came out of them was completely different. So I changed the name of them to because meta program doesn't really mean a lot. But if I said to you, what is your cognitive intention? At least you can map those 2 words together and create a relative meaning, right? Based on that, using a system called the Identity Compass at the time, I had a number of people who wanted to learn my system to give a score on self-awareness. So you do the Identity Compass. It returns a score. For example, if your internal is up here, but your external is down here, you behave in a certain way. If your external is up here and your internal is down here, you behave in a very, very different way, right?
Can you just give an example to that so we can
Of course
put
I
a picture
can.
to it?
So if I said to you, you're wearing a blue blouse. If I said to you, Lisa, I really don't like your blue blouse. You could say 2 things. 1, Darren, actually don't care what you think, internal perspective. Or Darren, oh my God, Darren doesn't like my shirt. What should I do? External perspective. Now, the problem is, with a massively external perspective, eventually you're going to need therapy.
Yeah.
Right? With a massively internal perspective, you can go 2 ways. You can be either a complete arse, or you're doing it from a position of awareness. And you're choosing not to take on board the other person's perspective. That's 3 things right there. Therapy, forgive my English, arse, or at choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And that's the point. So that's the theory. How at choice are you in your capacity to take on board someone else's perspective? If people with therapy needs are not. It hurts them. Your words physically hurt them. So I devised a measure of awareness based on 50 of those types of shortcuts. Internal, external, towards, away from, and it works. And don't get me wrong, I had over 8,200 profiles supporting my hypothesis. So the research was quantitative and qual. So it was quite solid research. Based on that PhD, I've got a number of people in France, Germany, Australia, South Africa, Sweden, Norway, all using that in their development of other people and in their coaching, because it really does lend itself well to coaching. So my research is in a number of languages because of that. That is essentially the IAD, Institute for Adult Development. We also deliver workshops for managers, C-suite, anybody really, because this is the thing, right, Lisa? We hear someone's title and you think, well, Darren's got a doctorate, he must be clever. It's not true, right? I know loads of people with doctorates, they're not clever at all. But the other thing is as well, we hear somebody like the CEO or the MD or the boss, and you assume that because of they've gone up the ranks, they're clever. They're not. They're not that clever. They make the same mistakes in their thinking that everybody else does. It's just that they've got different information coming in that they make a more informed decision about the business. So they appear to be clever. And I hope that makes sense to people listening and watching, right? So I don't care when I go into a C-suite or into a bunch of managers, I see the patterns. I hear their language. I hear how they construct their world from, for example, an internal or an external perspective. Once you listen for the patterns, it doesn't matter whether they're the president of the United States, let's not use that one, or or they're, let's say they're Elon Musk, or they're me, or they're you, or they're my 12-year-old kid, whatever, it doesn't matter. We understand how they represent themselves in their language and their construction. That's key for me. Yeah.
What are the similarities that you see in CEOs that wouldn't be obvious to teams?
Great question. Long-term thinking, abstract thinking, and their capacity to stop, step back, step out of their limitations and look at it from a different angle. Now, that all sounds very obvious, but we don't do it. Using my research, people know if they're internal, the example I've already given you. They know. What they don't know is if they're abstract, if they're global. What's the big picture thinking? Or do they focus in on details? And I've got a book coming out called, well, the first one's called Thinking Deliberately. It's nearly finished. And it's called Thinking Deliberately because we don't. But the next book is called Coaching Deliberately. And then the one after that is called Leading Deliberately. And that's where the leadership comes into it. Because we teach, I'm also a lecturer at university, and we teach leadership. But we teach it as if it's true. So, for example, you've got autocratic leadership all the way down to like coaching leaders or transformational leadership. But what they don't tell you, Lisa, is that a transformational leader is only capable, let me rephrase that. Someone able to do transformational leadership is about 15% of the population. But they teach transformational leadership as if everybody's doing it.
What are the components of transformation? I can imagine it, but for those
Good.
else, how would you describe their personality or measurable components?
Very good. Personality is not real, but we'll come on to that one later. So from a leadership
Remember,
perspective,
I'm likely to
yeah,
forget I'm a woman of a certain age.
you and me both. You and me both. There's one called servant leader, and I really hate it. I really hate it. There's videos, go to YouTube, you'll see my videos on it. But again, it's the external socialized nature of it that's not useful at all. But from a transformational perspective, what we need is somebody who is capable of being long-term thinking. What's your 20-year plan? Well, in order to think 20 years in the future, you've got to be joining dots. And your capacity to join dots is definitely linked to your level of cognitive complexity. The more dots you can join, the further forward you go. Elliot Jacques called it span of discretion. So there's loads of research out there. It's not just Darren making this up. Global, abstract. Well, what are the ideas? What are the principles at play here? Okay, but also you've got to be abstract is paired with concrete, which is who, why, where, when, what, and how, that kind of thing. But it's not just the fact that you're doing global, abstract, long term. It's the fact that you can choose to do them. And more importantly, and this is for everybody, think about, can you choose not to? Can you choose not to do it? And we don't often ask that question. So you look at things like trait theory or whatever, and they say, well, you're very agreeable. Yes, but none of the questions ever asked me if I could choose not to be agreeable. When do I want to choose to be an arse? We'll come back to that word. Why? Because it's important. Sometimes you might need to choose it. A leader needs to know that they are capable of choosing, seeing the bigger picture, seeing the bigger pattern, and they're capable of joining dots that the people around them aren't capable of joining. That's only 15%. What then tends to happen, and I wrote an article about this on LinkedIn not long ago, is if they're not the most complex leader, they then do something called leading by proxy. And what that means is they'll say, let's pretend I'm the boss and you're my one of my many deputies, right? And I say, oh, there's this problem. Well, Lisa, what would you do? Yeah, that's what I would do, Lisa. Yeah, let's do that. And they ask the people around them. So it looks like they're making decisions, but they're not. They're getting the information from the other people. Now, somebody might say, well, Darren, that's just delegation. No, I'm talking about their cognitive capacity to lead in the first instance. You'll know when they're not capable. Yeah? Look, your dog-shaped cushion is moving.
Your cushion's moving by its. I saw your door open by itself earlier as well. I thought a small child might run in,
Two
or an
dogs.
animal, two dogs. Yes,
They're not
so
here.
it's
So
about
have I
conscious
sidetracked you?
choice.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's not. It's life, isn't it? Conscious choice. I also want to just pick up a bit about how does personality play into leadership?
So I've got videos on YouTube about personality as well. And the idea is this. Alan Watts said, you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago.
Mm,
But psychologists, not me, even though I would consider myself a psychologist, psychologists tell me that you can't change a personality, and it's wrong. Of course you can change a personality, because think about what happens during trauma. Please don't think about trauma, but what happens during trauma. Well, something changes and your behavior changes. But what comes before the behavior is your thinking. So if we can measure your thinking using potentially 50 cognitive shortcuts, and we know that you're too external and not enough internal, and we get that to balance after about a few months, the main point we get to is choice. If you're no longer doing the things you used to do because you're not thinking the way you used to think, that's a personality change, right? With sufficient, sorry, Lisa, with sufficient, basically on my scale, my awareness quotient scale, 5 to 10, at 8, 9, I haven't met anybody at 9, so forgive me, but at 8, you are choosing your personality in the moment. The higher your level of self-awareness, the greater your capacity to choose your personality, which kind of renders the label obsolete.
how would you describe what a personality is versus
I think that's just the wonders of
semantics?
the English language. It's semantics. I mean, what is my character? Do you think that character is more stable over time? Because that's one of the arguments about traits and personality is it's stable, but it's not. But we're not. I'm definitely not more agreeable today than I was when I was 25. You know, and I'm definitely much more aware today of how I am and who I am. And when I stand up in front of people and talk, I choose how I want to be in the moment. And
Absolutely. I mean, I'm
you know,
I'm putting I'm putting myself into what you're saying and over and
perfect.
very quickly going over my personality and character, and I'm trying to work out what I think the difference between the two is. One feels more embedded and one feels more created. I don't know. Those are just feelings though, and not
Nice.
thought
No,
out
no,
thoughts.
constructed. So the thing is, right. So for example, I've got a video coming out probably very very soon about the differences between introvert and extrovert. Right? There is no such thing. I'm very introverted. Yes, but in what context? Can you Can you choose not to be? Well, yeah. Sometimes I'm extroverted. Then you're neither or you're both. And it's not ambivert in the middle. The question isn't whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. The question is, can you choose? That's it. The greater your level of self-awareness, the more capable you are of choosing introversion, extroversion in the moment. And I've got a video on it that shows you the deconstruction of each using cognitive intentions. My cognitive intentions. Yeah, it is awesome, but I'm very biased.
When I look over my timeline, and I was just having a conversation with somebody earlier about my personality felt very manufactured, and I remember from a very young age wanting an identity, not consciously knowing this, but from a very young age wanting to be seen as somebody. Isn't she doing well? Considering, I loved it when people would say that about me, and I would
Considering what?
well.
Don't tell us.
Oh, this is where I out myself. It's why I'm not on the radio anymore. I didn't know what was coming out of my mouth next. But because I had a very challenging childhood and it was pretty public, people would say, people would comment on my character or my personality. Isn't Lisa doing well considering? Isn't she great considering? Which was dangerous because I would recreate opportunities to do well considering, which meant I would choose the hard way, carry a heavier bag than I needed to.
Would you?
Oh, that kind of unconsciously because I wanted to be doing
Are
well
you sure it was a?
considering.
Well, that's my question because a lady called Lisa, no, you're Lisa, a lady called Carol Dweck did some research on, and this is an issue we'll come to later, but fixed mindset and growth mindset. Carol Dweck, remember we talk about it, see it on LinkedIn all the time. It's not useful for adults, even though they try to put it in an adult environment. It's not a growth mindset; it's complexity, right? The problem with the word mindset is the set part.
That's
Okay,
yeah.
from your perspective, what Carol Dweck said was that you would choose the easy options so that you continually got support. And, oh, isn't she clever? Oh, isn't she great? Or isn't she great because, even though, despite, you know? So I'm interested to know, please don't explain it, but I'm interested to know if you were consciously picking the difficult things.
So I wanted to stand out. I wanted to absolutely stand out. I wanted to be under a light myself, not with other people, sharing the light with anybody else. I wanted to be, and I know why I wanted to be. I wanted to be individual. I wanted to be acknowledged. I wanted attention. So I would do things like do the national three peaks, but I'd be the only girl. I would, and what else would I do? I'd want to be the best, but I knew I wanted to be it because I wanted the spotlight, and I think I wanted acknowledgement that I was a good person. But this thing about, isn't she doing well considering? I had to get a grip of it so that I didn't keep going into situations that were difficult, so I could keep wearing that badge because it keeps you in a cycle of behaviour.
Of course it does. And at what point did you become aware of that cycle?
In my 20s, probably around 27, 28.
So a couple of years ago.
Yeah, like
4 years ago.
yesterday. Yeah, thank you. This conversation is going to go on for a very long time if you keep flattering me. Is there a link there then about when we become more self-aware or
Yeah, I
you
mean,
you found?
well, women, I mean, there's all the talk about girls are mature quicker than boys, but when you get to university, it kind of all balances out anyway. But in reality, your brain and my brain stop developing around 25. So they thought then that we couldn't develop after 25 or so, but that's not true. We continue to develop into our 80s. So my question really is, what triggered your awareness of this pattern of behavior, that kind of idea?
I can't remember what triggered it. I do remember thinking, don't know. I think it was the discomfort of thinking that I always had to be in a difficult
Away
situation.
from, perfect.
Yeah,
That's an away from strategy, which is
yeah.
one of the cognitive intentions.
But you know, I love towards. I'm more of a, I kind of let go of the past and I love towards. Like, for example, I'll set a goal that's amazing because of who I need to be in the preparation for the goal, that the value of that, which you're going to say, you're absolutely right. Don't you love that sentence? You're going to say, but that's also away from Lisa because so for example, this is sounding like a therapy session. I'm just being open and
It's
honest.
very good. I thought that 5 minutes ago exactly. So I kind of keep my questions down a bit, but yeah.
I'm not so measured when I'm talking to other people about keeping my questions down. But so when we came out of lockdown, I decided to take a group of women to base camp Everest. I didn't have a group of women. I created a group of women. So I wanted this goal that I would come out of lockdown empowered. I'd been shrunk and I wanted to come out in a way that required me to show up in my own life fully and wholly, to be light and bright, something to exercise for, which is a towards motivation, but it's, as you're quite right in thinking, I'm guessing you're
I am a
thinking this.
doctor.
And thinking is necessary, and your free will, obviously, and deliberate thinking. But I was wanting to get away from feeling small, feeling disempowered, feeling manipulated by whoever, the government, feeling unloved, undervalued. So I was moving away from that, but I was putting all of my focus on where I was going and who I needed to be. Can you dismantle that for me, Doctor?
I think, yeah, I can. I mean, but we don't want to do it on camera.
No, I am more broken than I thought.
No, you're not. See, this is the point, you see. And again, you're looking at your
Growth.
contribution. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definite growth. But the idea from an away from perspective towards an away from perspective, it's not that you are towards or away from. It's that you have the capacity to choose it.
Mm.
Yeah. Can you choose not to? Right. So now, as you know your pattern, as you figured out your pattern, you're more capable of choosing not to. Does that make sense? And that, to me, is high level thinking. If you're not capable of choosing, and please, everybody who's watching or listening to this, when was the last time you acted habitually? You reacted to a situation, you either cried or did something or shouted or whatever, and you acted habitually. Because if your habits are that way inclined, you're not in control.
Mm-hmm.
If you are capable of stopping, stepping back, and looking at the meta position, shall we say, then you're in control. That's high level thinking. I don't care where you're from or what you do, what you look like. you're measured, you're deliberate. So now we get to the point why my book is called Thinking Deliberately.
I love that. I want to talk about it.
By all means. Yeah, so let's ask that, Lisa. How deliberate is your thinking?
She says, demonstrating it. I like to think I've done a lot of work on it. Like I choose what I think much more than I ever did before. And I choose my perspective by nowhere near the finished article. That won't ever
Never will
be
be.
done. But I choose what I think because I know, and if I have a thought that feels uncomfortable, I wear another thought and see how I feel with it, and whether I feel like I'm lighter, brighter, whether I can take action, whether I can.
So what you're saying, right, is in my theory we have 4 pillars:
Mm,
intention, awareness, choice, response. Intention,
mhm,
awareness, choice, response. What's your intention in the moment? How aware are you of that intention? What
mhm,
choices does that awareness create? And then can you choose your response based on the 3, right? Now, what you're saying is your intention is relatively aware. You know what you're talking about, right? So your awareness of your intention is key. And then you start to choose, and then you respond accordingly. So you are living the 4 pillars of constructive development theory: intention, awareness, choice, response. That for me is high level thinking. Now, when we look at it from a coaching perspective, one of the reasons for creating the institute, was because things like the ICF, the EMCC, they couldn't validate my approach. And my approach is based on levels of development, right? We need to ensure that the coach is always a level above the client. They don't do that. So when we look at it from a cognitive intention perspective, maybe you've got 3 cognitive intentions out of 50 that really are out of balance, right? We coach based on those alone. I don't care what your problem is, because your problem isn't a problem of utility and agency. It's a problem of construction. If your thinking is here,
mhm.
your problem is here, because that's where you're constructing your thinking. So what we do is we work on developing your thinking. So by the time we come back in 6 months, 12 months, don't care, to look at your problem, it's probably disappeared because your thinking has changed.
Mm.
Yeah. So for me, the coaching element, the developmental element, the starting point of a coaching relationship has completely shifted. And as I listen to you, someone trying to coach you now will have to be at least a level above you to get what, pretty much, would have to be a level above you to get what you're saying and understand how to help you. And the help would be in the profile, not in your thinking. Because all this nonsense about, oh yes, all the clients have got everything within them, to fix their own. No, they haven't. They really haven't. If they're here on the scale, then their problems are here. They don't have the self-awareness to develop the thinking up. Plus, you can't do it yourself anyway. You have to have someone saying, oh, Lisa, have you thought about it like this? Have you noticed this pattern? And then by virtue of someone else, I call these people a more complex other. By virtue of this more complex other, looking at your patterns and pointing them out, you grow your thinking.
And that's where the deliberate thinking comes in that somebody can say this to me and I can choose. I have the cognitive
Uh,
framework. I can make that
yep.
internal choice. But
Uh,
I don't. Somebody doesn't say, "Have you thought about this?" and I have to own it. It's like, "Oh, I'll wear that and consider that," rather
yep.
than
See,
blindly
that's what.
acting it.
Yeah, I can see you're amazing. That's awesome.
I'm done. I'm complete, aren't I?
Pretty
If
much. I'm
only.
sure
But
yeah,
actually, when,
this.
when people say, "If only I were complete," I love the journey. And I don't know about you. I love the journey of discovery and of growth.
That's why I
Being the
teach.
finished article or being complete
That's why I teach.
doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you get out of the teaching?
I love um I love the interaction. I teach. So, for example, I teach on an apprenticeship program right now for business, and each workshop is around 6 hours. So 5 hours, and I'm stood in front of people for 5 hours talking about whatever's on the screen. But we don't always talk about what's on the screen because my job isn't to teach, because I can't teach them anything. All I can do is make them think. So, and my personal philosophy is and laugh, make them laugh. And if I can get them laughing, then they're engaged. And if they're engaged, then they're learning, right? So I will stand there and we will talk about whatever's on the screen, fair enough. But I will always map it to how they think. And I'm more interested because these guys are not 18, they're 40. They're your age, they're 35, right? And they've got a lot of effort. They've got a lot of experience. Well, I'm not the guru at the front of the room. I'm just the facilitator to find out what and how they do it, right? Now, it does work out that having a complex mind based on my research I am able to join dots that they haven't thought about. But that is my entire job as a teacher, as a lecturer, an educator, whether it's in front of a C-suite or students. It's to join dots they haven't thought about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a really visual person, so I'm imagining that your style of teaching is those slides are there based on I don't really know these people as well as I'm going to know them. So these are my starting point, but where it goes is down to them.
Yes,
And who you are is down to them. I mean, you'll obviously be yourself, but what you bring out of them, how playful you are, it's an
always.
alchemy that is a once in a lifetime every time you're in front of a group, even if it's the same group. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And my delivery, my style has won me teaching awards. And I get comments all the time. And if you look on things like LinkedIn, I get students saying, Darren's very tall and handsome. I'm not very tall or handsome.
In this chair, I'm 6 foot as well.
Yeah, exactly. You just can't tell I'm 6 foot. But it's the way I deliver, because nothing should be taken too seriously, which also means that we have, I mean, if I'm teaching master students, invariably they're from all over the world, and they're much more direct about how they think about stuff than we are. And I mean we as in English British people. And so we then play on the taboo subjects that we're not supposed to talk about. But it's only here that we don't talk about them. Everybody else talks about stuff that, it's fantastic. But if you do it and mock them at the same, I mock my students a lot because it engages with them, you know?
Yeah. Do you know, I'm just thinking of the benefits of what you're saying to people accessing more of their mind. And I'm guessing that the mocking, the laughter helps remove the resistance that often people can show up with just because they're guarded or wanting to protect themselves or these
Yeah.
ideas where they might get outed in some way.
Well,
And
I can tell
the
you,
mocking levels everybody. Sorry, go on.
sorry, I can tell you because if you consider where some of my students are from and the cultural differences, culturally, they're not allowed to question the doctor at the front of the room. I knock that on the head on day one. You know what I mean?
How?
If you disagree, it takes a couple of weeks. But if you disagree with me, say so. Nothing here is wrong. There's nothing you can say that I haven't heard before. Your question won't be stupid. You might be, but the question isn't. I'm kidding. But this is it, right? So if they're from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, that kind of thing, they say Doctor. They say Dr. Darren. If they're Nigeria, they say Mr. Darren. It's still respect, right? And then you say no, it's Doctor. You've just failed your first assignment. Unlucky. But you have to break down those cultural barriers. So, for example, one of the things I asked them, Lisa, is can you step out of your culture so that it doesn't impact your thinking? Invariably, they say no.
Then
One
do you
thing I
put it
do,
in the test? Then do you give them an
yeah, of course we do. I give them a test. Let's say I'm teaching a project management module on a master's degree, right? Which I do sometimes. You'll have Africans and Southeast Asians in the room. So you'll have Nigerians, Kenyans, blah, 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 right? Indians, Pakistanis, Sri Lanka, that kind of thing, right? But what you notice is, I've been doing this a while, and what you notice is they all sit on their own continents. So in the room, they'll sit on their own continents on each table. So even before I even meet them, I say to them, I'll sit there quietly, and they've never heard of me, don't know who I am, they don't know anything about me. And I will say, right, there's enough of you now. Where you're sitting now is pretty much where you're going to sit for the rest of the semester. You won't change. Also, please notice who you're sitting with. Do they look like you? So when you come in my room, what do you filter for in the first instance? Do you filter for sameness or difference? They're the same as me. I'm going to go and sit with them. They're different to me. I'm going to sit away from them, right? And this is what I do. And I said, right, this is a project management course. Let's get it straight away. Let's get down to the cultural elements of this. Because once you appreciate that project management is all about procedural thinking, it's a piece of cake. It then becomes about the people that you're managing. And people are invariably the worst, right? So you've got a team. You've got one project. You've got a team full of Nigerians and a team full of Sri Lankans. You have to manage both those teams to get to the same end result. Go. Right? It makes them think straight away about the cultural differences of people in a work environment, which is one of the things we teach as well, right? But I make them think about it immediately. And then I take the mickey out of them and say, all you do is you throw something at the Nigerians, get them arguing with each other, leave them to it, tell the Sri Lankans what to do and they'll do it. Project done, right? The Nigerians get it because when they start getting animated, they raise their voices and shouting. They're not actually shouting. It's just what they do, right? And the Sri Lankans are quite placid and compliant, and they'll do whatever you tell them. So you're highlighting a number of things in one small exercise on day one. And then you start to tease apart their culture and start to make fun of it, including my own culture, obviously. And it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel like anything can happen. We can talk about anything. So for the next 11, 12 weeks, they're open. And it works, you know. But not every lecturer does that, I'm sure.
No, I love it. I love what is the common belief that people come to your teachings with that most gets in the way?
Oh, what a great question. And I know it's a great question because I'm actually having to think about it.
I'm thinking about it for myself as well. I mean, I will be listening to your answer when you eventually get it.
It's difference. We think we're different. And because we look different, because we're black, white, brown, yellow, pink, green, blue, purple, or whatever colour we are, that's the first thing we see. So we automatically make assumptions about someone based on what they look like, the colour of their skin, the colour of their hair, whatever, right? But when you look at it from a CDT perspective, and this is how I explain it to my students, when you look at it from a developmental perspective, what does an idiot from Nigeria think like? What does an idiot from England think like? One's black, one's white, but they're both idiots. And they both think in roughly the same way. Low level, what's in it for me, automated, habituated behaviors, quick to temper, whatever the words are, right? And when you get over the fact that everybody might look differently and culturally we have some differences, fair enough. Actually, we can deconstruct the thinking of anyone from anywhere using the 50 cognitive shortcuts, because there's a billion profiles using my system, way more than 16 from the MBTI, for example. And I've got data on people who are bicultural. So for example, somebody who is both Spanish and German, right? What they do is when they do a profile in Spanish, they think a certain way. They construct their thinking themselves in a certain way. Then when they do it, let's say 6 months later, they do the same profile again, but in German, they construct themselves differently, right? So in Spanish, they're much more laissez-faire with time, but in German, they're much more procedural and efficient. And I'm not kidding. Those are stereotypes, but they're true. So when you explain that to an Indian person and an African person, wherever they're from in Africa, yeah, you look different, but you pretty much construct your thinking in the same way that I do, and I'm from England. Yeah. So it's the initial difference. Actually, what unites us is our thinking. Is that okay?
Yeah, it is. And in the book, you share about the growth begins when we embrace the complexity of who we are and commit to evolving beyond it. How do people usually meet that opportunity? You know, is it circumstantial? Is it like life's created a catalyst? Is it for growth? How do people usually meet that opportunity of evolving beyond?
So it depends on the context, because sometimes it could be if it's work. I've got a friend who's got a number of coffee shops, right? Like 20, quite a good number. So I asked him, I said, how do you cope with the complexity of running 20 coffee shops and everything else that goes with it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You personally can cope with the complexity of 5 coffee shops, no problem at all. How do you cope with 20? And he says, I've got an application, a computer program that deals with the complexity for me, right? So he has overcome what could have been a complexity nightmare from a running perspective for his specific thinking by using an application that he bought, right? But when you've got bosses who are promoted beyond their capacity, it's called the Peter principle. When you've got these people who are promoted beyond their capacity, they might burn out because the role is this complex and they are this complex. So they burn out and leave. Other way around, the role is this complex, the person is this complex. They get bored and leave. And again, that's that guy called Cenk Malai. Probably said it incorrectly, but he figured that out. The key is whether it's a traumatic experience for the growth because you're moving away from some kind of pain, or if I'm going to say it's not towards necessarily, but it's whether you're aware of the pain, of the growth. Because people like Keegan and Lasky talk about how, and Kurt Greuter and that, they say how moving from level 3 to 4 is painful. But if growth is your objective, it's not painful. It's just part of what you do. Now, in my video on stage transition, in my research paper on stage transition, and the chapter on stage transition, it's actually your awareness of your need to grow that is the key to growth. I know I need to grow. Well, that's not painful.
And do you think when people, when they know they're in, when they consciously know they're in a growth period or season, do you think those that go through it regularly know, right, there's going to be some symptoms here that I need to be aware of so that I can accommodate them or not be alarmed by them or not opt out of
So,
the growth because of them?
so what you're talking about now is joining dots. And that's what I said earlier. So the greater your cognitive complexity, the more capable you are of joining. And if you watch the videos or whatever, you'll see the videos. I've got images of this. I've got a slide for everything, Lisa, basically. And it's your greater capacity to join more dots. As your complexity grows, it's not that you can join more dots, you actually see more dots.
Yes.
Then you join them, you're capable of joining them. So what you're talking about is, for somebody at this level, that might be a little painful, that they might not be able to join the dots you're talking about and therefore won't quite get as profound a response as they'd expect. But the more complex you are, you see all the dots, which means you see the ramifications of joining these dots and the spread of outward ramifications again of what's going to happen in the future, what potentially could happen. Was that okay? Did that answer
Yes.
it?
Yeah. But I've got a couple of just words I've written down and I don't know the other words that go around it. So I'm just going to say,
Dog.
yeah, for those that are just listening on the podcast, that isn't my tummy. Oh, it might be soon. It's Lexi. Self-worth. Where does self-worth play in our thinking?
Well, there's two things there. There's two things there because self-esteem, self-worth, whatever you want to call it, right? And also just ask me, I forgot, what's it called? The symptom, imposter syndrome. Got it. I got there in the end, Lisa. So you've got self-esteem and imposter syndrome, that kind of thing. Self-esteem assumes there's a self. Self-worth assumes there's a self. The esteem side of things is actually an external locus of evaluation, and you're relying on other people to tell you how great or not you are, right? You don't have a self-constructed individual person, to actually bounce the ideas off. You're relying on others. So in order to get some self-worth and some self-esteem, forget what everybody else is thinking or saying about you. Run it through your own system first and say, is this useful for me? If it's not useful for me, if it makes me feel yucky, I reject it. All right, so get yourself an internal locus of evaluation. That will take care of the self-worth and the self-esteem, because really and truly, again, it's not about whether we say, I don't care what other people think, or I really care what other people think. It's about your capacity to choose in the moment. Why should Lisa listen to Darren? Just because he's got a doctorate doesn't make him any cleverer. But he does have a decent theory and he's got tons and tons of research to support his hypotheses, right? Maybe then you can choose to listen to me. But up to that point, your internal locus of evaluation will be questioning my expertise. And that's perfect.
So when I think about self-worth, for example, the my self-value, or what I've noticed in lots of different environments that I've trained, coached, mentored in, is people's behavior. And again, it's not their deliberate thinking, but I've seen people's behavior where they've removed themselves some great opportunities because they've not, I've thought, my diagnosis, not what they've said, has been because they've been treated in such a good way that then their self-worth is not familiar with it, so sabotages it.
Yeah, so they're self-sabotaging, but that could be a trauma response and you just don't know about their trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's common. Let's say, for example, one of the things I might be researching next is narcissism. I've been
Oh,
in contact with a number of, and it's mainly women, but I do have one man. One guy I'm thinking of is just, scum of the earth. The way he controls and manipulates women, the way he does it, the way narcissists behave and think, and how they do what they do. I am disgusted. You can see it in my face. I am disgusted
there's
with
no
it.
laughing matter, is it?
No, and I really want to and I've created something called Narc Bingo, right? Because it's on my website, it's on the IAD website. But Narc Bingo, and it's if you hear any of these phrases, any of these things, do your bingo bit and go bingo house, you never talk to them again.
Yes.
No two ways about it. Don't give them the second benefit of the doubt. You just cut them off and block them. Right, and I've got this. So this is the research that I want to do next. Narcissism. And I've forgotten your question because I've got in my brain now
Who
about how.
cares what my question was? This is much more exciting wherever you've led us. Well, I want to ask a couple of questions around this because I think narcissism is becoming
Trauma response. That was it.
trauma
Sorry, Lisa. It
response.
was about
Yeah.
trauma response. Yeah.
So narcissism, well, I want you to go through a few of the narc bingo if you see them. The other thing with narcissists, you don't realize that you're talking with a narcissist initially. Sometimes, I'm not going to say always, because in some way you feel engaged by them. They're giving you something, in my experience, they're giving you something, whether it's, I don't know, compliments, but they're basically investing in the new
No.
supply.
Okay. So what they're doing there, they do things like love bombing.
Yeah, but
Let,
it
let, let's
doesn't look like, though, doesn't
no,
look
and
like
this is it.
this coming that way. It's just like,
Yeah.
you're such a good presenter. You are up there with that kind of
Right. And
carry
it's
on.
that.
Sorry.
It's the hyperbole that they use. Hyperbole is using extremes, right? So, Lisa, I tell you what, you're very pretty, Lisa. I can't believe
Thank
how
you.
pretty
I'll
you
take
are.
that.
Yeah.
Right. No, you're playing a role. Sorry. Got.
I'm love bombing you. Give me a second. I'm love bombing. Lisa, you're amazing. You're the best person I've ever met. I can't believe I wish I'd met you 10 years ago when we were both 30. And you're so beautiful. And you know what? I think I love you already. I think we should get married. You see the pattern. It's just ridiculous. So what they do is, let's call it love bombing. And there are specific patterns of behavior that they do. So if you wanted to look at it from a narc bingo perspective, really what I've got is some negatives, and it's and actually on one of them on the web page I'm thinking about, a friend of mine was on a dating site and she thought something was a bit off with this guy. So she just said to him, I'm sorry, I've changed my mind. I don't want to meet you. Right.
Mhm.
I've changed my mind, which, she's a lady. Ladies change their mind, right? He comes back with 4 or 5 text, really, thanks for letting me know. Now I'll have to cancel it. Right? Now that is victim of circumstance of self-pity. Next message. I was really looking forward to it, and now you're telling me after this, after we've talked. Over dramatization. Just to let you know, I've cancelled it. Wish you'd told me earlier. Playing the martyr. I think you blew me out because you've got somebody else. Projecting their own negative traits. And then a day later, completely ignoring all the BS from the day before, how's your day going? Right? This is why I want to do it from a narc bingo perspective. If you hear anything like that, just cut them off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's patterns of thinking, it's patterns of behavior. But normally the narcs, people say narcs are really clever. They're not really clever. What they have is habituated patterns of behavior that works with humans. I would say women in men's cases, but it also works with men. Yeah. You get taken in by it. But I want it to be a preventative measure, not something that's done after the event. Yeah. If you see this, cut them off. Never ever engage with them, because I know a couple of people who have had their lives just completely ruined by narcissists, and I think it would be worth. Don't get me wrong. There's tons of research out there, but not from a developmental perspective, which is obviously where I would come at it from.
And I think it's tough for people when they've already developed a relationship that they've got their own habits of wanting to be kind to the person, not wanting just to cut them off,
That's
wanting,
called fawning.
yep, but also they wanting to withdraw, extricate them. Is extricate a word? Anyway, withdraw in a way that doesn't hurt their feelings, but all that does, it keeps the web still entangled, and they
Correct.
use it to negotiate with all the time.
Well, the narc thinks they'll always be able to get back in. They
Yeah,
always think they can come in and they'll drop you, ghost you for a year, and then come straight back in and pick up where they left off. But it takes a strong person to tell them to go forth and multiply.
yeah.
But that takes time.
And let's just talk about a narcissist in a business partnership.
It's
I
never their
mean,
fault. It's always
how
someone
do you
else's
think they
fault.
behave in a business relationship, a narcissist?
You'd make a decision, and what should we do about this problem we've got? You do that. Oh, okay. And then you say, well, what do you mean? What's wrong? Oh, nothing. I wouldn't have done it that way. That's all. But if you want to do it that way, let's do it your way. It's fine. It's language patterns. Yeah. And they use manipulation techniques because they just cast a shadow of a doubt. And then over time, that doubt builds up and builds up and builds up until it gets to a point where the business partner doesn't trust their own decision making.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And where does the labour of work fall? Does the narcissist pull their weight, or
No, of course not. They'll get everybody else to do the work for them, but they'll make it look like it was all their idea and they did all the running around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they want the spotlight then. They
Yeah,
want they
look at
want
me,
the
always. And it's always about them. Look at me, look how great I am. Look at what I'm doing for everybody. I'm always doing this stuff for you. You never do anything for me. It's always a one-way relationship with you guys. I'm always doing everything. And in reality, they've done nothing. They just manipulate the situation.
narcissism is a juicy such a juicy
Yeah,
conversation, but they're dangerous. They're
they
dangerous
are. And it's,
because you play Russian roulette with your soul when you go into a relationship with a narcissist. It's not something you think, oh, I'll be all right, I can manage it. I'll only see them once in a while, or I'll only speak to them once in a while. They have a piece of you that they will keep feeding back and pulling away.
do you know what the
My
answer is?
experience.
Yeah, do you know what the answer is? I'm guessing you do know the answer. It's completely cutting them off. Never, ever
Absolutely.
respond to them. If they email you, delete. Don't read it, delete it. If they text you, or don't let them text you, block them, full stop. But never, ever give them any information, because that drives them crazy. No information. And I learned that the hard way, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all
Yeah,
have, haven't we? And I think the no contact is sadly the only way. And I think that what we end up doing with narcissists sometimes is understanding their backstory and
that's all lies.
having, yes, part of the manipulation.
Part of the manipulation. You've got to feel sorry for me. It's all about me. Me, which is very low level thinking. Internal, caring for self.
So that's going to be your,
I'm going to try and do that in 2025. I've already got I have an Apple Mac, so I use a thing called Keynote, which is like their equivalent of
yeah.
PowerPoint, right? So for every single thing I've ever done, I've got a keynote for it, right? And I've
Mhm.
got hundreds of keynotes now. Like I've got a keynote on leadership, which will inform my book on leadership, right? So I've got a keynote on CDT, my theory, and narcissism.
Mhm.
So I'm building it up, and I'm talking to a number of women and a guy so far, and I'm building up this picture, but I'm mapping it to how they construct their thinking. And I've got some profiles of some narcissists. I just need more.
So you actually want to interview narcissists. Do you know what though?
They don't think they're narcissists.
Exactly. They don't identify. So how do you get them? How do you, because there are a couple though, I've seen a few of them on YouTube that say I am a narcissist, but I'm conscious of it, and these are the and advising people about how to be with narcissists and how narcissists think. But as they're void of empathy
Correct.
and they don't see themselves as narcissists, how are you getting your
I don't know.
volunteers?
It's delusional, isn't it? I mean, all I can do is I could probably put something out there that says, "Have you ever lived with a narcissist?" You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Have you ever dated a narcissist? Tell me who it was. No, you can't do that because of GDPR. You know, have you? And do it that way. I could get the information vicariously, but I could probably do that online. But what I could do is something called a thematic analysis. So if I interviewed 20 and asked them the same kinds of questions, but left them a little open so that they had a little bit of room for, lateral movement, I could then analyze the themes that emerge from the responses and map those to my framework. And I could do that. But
And
in
what,
reality, go on.
go on, you go.
Well, I use a profile system, and I've got another questionnaire system that I use. I've got called Question Everything by the Question Lab. And I could create a question set specifically for narcs that teases out their construction of self. But I'd have to ask for volunteers, you know. And there's an ethics process. And if I did it as Darren Stevens, fine. But if I did it as part of my university, I'd have to go through all kinds of ethics as well.
And what do you want to do with your findings afterwards? What are you going to create it into a book for who?
I think the best thing to do is not date a narc. So I would want to give courses for women and men that says, when you're on these app sites and you're swiping left and right, do my course first. Take heed. Don't say do what I tell you, but do what the research shows you. Do not engage with them. If you see one or two triggers, do not engage.
There's plenty of other people you can, I guess.
Sorry, Lisa, there's something I was going to say quickly. On the news last week, it showed that a lady came on and was talking about the research in 50% of children between 13 and 17 have experienced, what's the word I'm looking for, abusive relationships. So what I'm thinking is like narcissistic behavior. 13 to 17-year-olds, or it might have been 19-year-olds, I'll get that right eventually. But the point is, in their teenage years, 50% of children have experienced narc-like behaviors. That's just wrong. What kind of kids are we raising?
As in their behaviors are narcissistic, or they're having it
They've
on them.
experienced it on them. They've experienced it. The other person has been controlling. The other person has been abusive.
Gaslighting.
Gaslighting, words like that I don't understand yet. You know, that kind of thing. Because I'm 50, so I would call it lying.
Yep. And I mean, I think one of the things as well that you experience as a narcissist changes reality on you all the time. And that
Definitely.
massively jumbles with that deliberate thinking
So,
methodology.
and they do it in different contexts as well. I know of one who I know specifically what happened. And their response to it, to the person that they were a narc to, was the opposite of what actually happened, because they had to reconstruct their own reality, delusional, to make them in charge.
Yeah.
But I knew it.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to watch. It was awful. It was just, you know, scum of the earth kind of bloke. I knew the scenario, and I knew that's not what happened, because the opposite happened, you know. But they have to construct their reality to be the one in control.
And to be the one that saves the day.
Exactly.
Mainly, or they create situations where they save the day, and the day didn't even need bloody saving.
That's exactly it.
We're
Yeah,
down a
exactly.
massive rabbit hole. But
We've
would
been
you?
going an hour, Lisa. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I've got a couple of minutes. Could you do your research from interviewing people that have been in relationships with narcissists to see what they
Yeah, that's what.
as well?
Yeah, that's what I said a minute ago. I could do that, but it would be a vicarious experience. In other words, I would look for I would interview 20 people who've dated, lived with, married narcissists, and analyze the themes that come out of the questionnaire that I interview them. I'll analyze the themes that come out of the questions. So yes, I definitely do that.
And you'd probably want to know who they were as a blank canvas and who they became. You know, the before and after version of the before narcissist version
Yeah.
of Lisa and the during narcissist version of
Yes.
Lisa, and then the unraveling of narcissists after.
Yeah.
There's three periods,
That's
isn't there?
right.
I think,
Yeah. So
forgive
I
me
mean,
if I'm just being enthusiastic for your subject.
no, that's fine. I mean, and they love bomb you, and you're their soulmate. You're the best thing since sliced bread. Everything's fantastic until it's not. Until you're hooked.
Yes. The moment you have a dependency on any level, that's when I think when the discarding comes in.
Very
And
good.
it's not to 100
Like that.
in 3 seconds.
Discarded, and then discarded, and then discarded. Yeah,
And then I
and they'll
know, sorry.
and I think they'll get you back in just to discard you, because then it looks like they're the ones in control.
Yes. Yes. And then there's something though called limerence that I learned about. Have you heard of limerence?
I have, but now you've said it, I really can't remember I literally only read about it or talked to someone about a week and a half ago.
So
Can you
in
remember what it means?
Lisa speak, yeah. If one has a need that has been completely like a desert, and then this person gives you a drop of water that feeds that desert, the attachment to that person is blown way bigger than it needs to be, because that need that was quite a big need, but in a tiny area of your life has been fed by this person. So it becomes this attachment where you see them through the eyes of that need being met rather than the whole.
Yep.
Does that make
Yep.
sense?
Of course it does. It does to me. Yeah. Yeah, you place an importance on the fact that but for me, they probably knew that need, because I'm going to be general here, and it's not true, but I'm going to be general on purpose. You get a woman, the bloke's the narcissist. You get a woman who's 40 years old. She's been married for X amount of years. They're not quite as attentive as they used to be. Things are a little bit boring. The narc knows this. It's the same pattern he plays with every 40-year-old woman. He shows them a bit of attention. I mean, a lot of attention. Tells them how fantastic they are. They've never been treated so wonderfully. he's in. He's got the hooks in. And it's not rocket surgery. I'm going to say easy. It's not easy. What I mean is, it's just a pattern he's done 1,000 times and knows what he's doing. And women fall for it. And it's that falling for it that I want to stop.
Yes. Yeah, we could talk. I said, didn't I, before?
Let's do another one. We'll do another one in a few months' time then on
Let,
narcissism.
let's, Darren. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for a very energized adventure of the mind and the soul. I don't know how else to put it. I am
My
so
pleasure.
grateful for your time, and we will have another conversation. I'll listen back to this and see where you've healed me in the conversation.
You're very too kind.
Oh, thank you so much, lovely.
Thanks a lot.